Hello, Burbankers!
And welcome back to another episode of the Mike and Roy Show with our ongoing series of interviews with all the Burbank City Council candidates. Really happy to have Tamala Takahashi with us today.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day.
Thank you for having
And
me.
you're welcome. And we're going to get right to the questions, if you're okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here we go. We ask every candidate the same questions, the same way, and we want the community to really get a feel for how you see certain issues.
Sure.
Here we go. The Burbank Airport plans to expand the terminal to 150% of its existing size. We know the plan is to replace the 14 gates, but with the expansion of the terminal, we're likely to see a dramatic increase in air and ground traffic. What are your thoughts on airport expansion at Burbank Airport?
Great. Thank you for the question. Yeah, the airport is an essential service in our city. It's very important to a lot of our residents. And this new airport development has been on a lot of people's minds, and you probably know it's been stalled now for a few years. But so my perspective is that the 14 gates, that it won't actually expand the number of flights because it's still restricted by how many flights can come in and out. And what I'm more concerned with is not the 14 gates. What I'm more concerned with is upcoming technology. We've already seen this, where the next-gen flight technology has increased the number of flights coming in and out of the airport, even though we've had the same number of gates. So as we move forward, I'm sure other technology will come along as well. And so as the size of the airport itself is not so much of a concern as how they squeeze in as many flights. And as long as the airport can make sure to restrict the amount of noise during off hours, to make sure that the airplanes are distributed evenly around all the communities and not hovering over one particular community, and they're not flying too low, the number of flights isn't so much a problem. But if they squeeze too many flights in, then they start to become too late or too early, and they fly low to get in fast. And so it's a problem if there's too many flights. So that's more of my concern about is the amount of flights that are squeezed into the time frame rather than the number of gates.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to skip ahead and let you.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Mike. We're going to question number 3.
Oh.
Exceedingly high salaries throughout our city staff has been a major concern for Burbank residents. Staff disagrees and argues that their salaries are in line with those in comparable communities and essential in order to retain employees. Our research and the high turnover rate among staff dispute that. What are your thoughts on staff salaries?
Okay, so when I read this question, I did research myself to see what the salaries were, and the research that I did not agree with what your statement is. The research I found was that the average salaries in Burbank are actually lower than market salaries. So I would like to see more data. I would like to see your data where you're looking at so I can compare that. But my general overview, my general view of the salaries in Burbank is that they have to be high enough and in market enough to attract good talent. Because if it's too low, then we won't get as good talent. The other cities will get it. But you don't want it to be so high that it's then too high of pay for what they're doing. So you want to find that sweet spot. And that sweet spot is probably just a little teeny weeny bit above market, because then you get the good quality talent. You don't lose it to other cities, but you're not paying so much for the staff. So I would have to look at your data to see if our actuals are comparative to other cities. The ones I saw, they're actually lower. But what you might be seeing is that a lot of our staff, especially our hourly staff, is working overtime. And it's that overtime that might bring their salaries higher than what is actually stated officially. A good example is our police staff. A lot of police staff and fire are working overtime. So it looks like they're actually being paid more, but what they're actually being paid is overtime. So I'd be very interested to hear what your numbers are and to be able to see that.
Good. Thank you. We're going to talk about the police now and go back to that question number 2.
Okay.
Police corruption, abuse, and systemic racism have been major issues nationwide within law enforcement agencies. How would you rate Burbank Police Department's record on these issues?
Great. So first I want to say that Black Lives Matter. It's important to always say during these discussions. So systemic racism is a real thing. It's not something that any city can claim to not have in their system. And oftentimes systemic racism is something that's not obvious. So when we think of racism, when we talk about racism, oftentimes we think about the really obvious racist attacks or destruction of property or online harassment or bullying. But a lot of systemic racism is subtle things. And so I believe that our police department we haven't seen the overt racism. We haven't seen a lot of the issues that other, like even LA Police Department, LAPD is facing with the real risk of death or being injured by the police because of race. However, there are definitely issues of systemic racism where, you know, people of color and Black people are more likely or more afraid of being pulled over. They're going to be questioned when they're walking through the community. When you see posts on Nextdoor about somebody doesn't belong in the neighborhood, it's almost always somebody who's Black or Latino or something. So that racism does exist, and it's right now is a really good time to do what Chief LaChasse has said many times, where the police has already done the President's Task Force 21st Century Policing adjustments, and now is another good time to even look closer and to improve even more. So LaChasse says we're doing great, but it's always room for more improvement. So that's kind of how I see it, that we, as a culture and as a community, is always an opportunity to look closer and see how we can do better, but overall, that we are lucky enough to have a community that's already done some work in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, I'm going to talk about the DIFs right now.
Okay, great.
Back to schools. Okay, so question number 5 here.
Okay.
Our neighboring communities charge developers a fee per unit that they build, but are much, much higher than the fees charged here in Burbank. These DIFs, or development impact fees, could greatly benefit our community, but our city council and staff are very hesitant to raise these fees to the level of our neighbors like Pasadena and Glendale.
Yeah.
What are your views on DIFs, and how do you feel our low fees are, and do you feel, excuse me, that the low fees are encouraging developers to replace much of our affordable housing with units that might be too expensive for most of our current residents?
Right. Okay, I'm going to talk about the development impact piece first. So my work on the Infrastructure Oversight Board, I see how hard it is to figure out which things to fund when you have money in the general fund. So DIFs usually end up in general fund and for paying for the things we need to pay for, right? But there's also a need sometimes for specific projects that are very difficult to fund through the general fund. So if you look at the Front Street project, the development impact fees might have been lower, but they also offered a lot of community benefits, like putting the elevator into Magnolia Park, the Magnolia Bridge, and improving the sidewalks around that area and some other improvements, that if that money from the development impact fees had been put in the general fund, would be very difficult to then allocate to those particular projects. So I think there needs to be a balance where there's enough development impact fees that we do have funding in our general fund, and for some of that goes to our schools too, and our housing as well. So to have that, enough of that, but at the same time not so high as to reduce the likelihood of being able to fund those specific projects that are difficult to fund through the general funds. So I can see why the council might be reluctant, because they see the benefit of those community projects that they have seen historically are difficult to fund through the general fund. But at the same time, I also see your point about how important it is to put more into our general fund. So I think it's important to have, again, the sweet spot we were talking about earlier, that sweet spot. I looked at the comparisons, and yes, we do have quite a bit lower, and that also there was a study done in February 2020 in the council. There was a study session about our development impact fees, but because of COVID, it got delayed. So I think it's time to bring it back and talk about it again and really reconsider the development impact fees to see if it's time to adjust them a little higher, but not so high that they impede on those community projects.
We had brought that up, how many years ago at council, and it had been delayed up until February, like by 2 years or something. And we're talking about, just on a side note, about our research, about a 1,200% rate difference between Glendale, Pasadena, and Burbank.
Right.
And we're that much lower. It's like, okay, well, let's raise it anyway.
Right. So you want it to be low enough so that it attracts developments here,
Yes.
but not so low that you're giving away the farm.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about schools.
Okay.
Roy and I both raised our children through the Burbank schools, and we know the schools are important to you too.
Yeah.
Burbank Unified School District has been attempting to pass a new parcel tax to support the financial needs of the schools. Burbank voters did not pass these ballot measures in our last 2 elections. Are you in favor of a new parcel tax to support our schools?
You probably won't like my answer, but yes.
I love your answer.
Okay, good. So yes, I voted for Measure I and for QS, and we are homeowners, and we did the math, and for us as a homeowner for a single-family home, we would pay an extra $200 per year, and we felt that that was worth giving to our schools. And one of the things that, for me, Measure I was important is that everybody participate in the tax through the whole city, that that the exemptions are very specific. So we had exemptions, in that measure, there was exemptions for seniors, those with disability, and extremely low income, and that makes sense. But originally in Measure I, there was an exemption for, I think, 11 or 12 of our largest businesses had an exemption. So I spoke up and said, that's not fair. We all need to share in the responsibility because those businesses benefit from good schools too, vice versa. So I do think a parcel tax is a way that we can fairly distribute the support of our schools, and it doesn't put any one particular family or business into too much responsibility. But I do understand that adding more taxes in an already high tax state and city, it's tough, it's a tough sell. So I do support it, but I also understand why there are some people who it's difficult to support it too. But I personally voted for it and would again.
Me too.
Oh, good. Yay.
But we don't, like, Roy and I don't always see eye to eye on things.
Good.
So when you say we're not gonna like the answer, don't assume that we both, see the same side of issues. And
That's great.
We wanna hear your side and your feelings about these issues, so people in the community can know a little bit more about you.
That's great. I'd love that.
I mean, that's
I
an
want to see you guys
example of-
argue. I've never seen you guys argue before,
Oh,
but I would love to see
No,
it.
you don't wanna see it.
I mean, today's an
We had an
example.
argument just this morning.
I told Mike, please don't wear blue. You look terrible on camera with blue. And he wore it. We don't always agree.
And I think my eyes really pop with the blue shirt.
Yeah, okay. It's really the important
okay.
issues we disagree on, right?
Yes. Yep.
That's what they come
With
to
the
Mike
election
Moore's show.
coming up, it is these important issues that
Yes.
we need to look into.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I
People
did debate
count
over
on
which
Mike.
shirt to wear too, so.
Okay, okay, so back to the questions. Our city council imposed what we see as restrictions on our ability to publicly address and engage with our elected officials and city staff. One of these restrictions was the elimination of final public comment at the close of every city council meeting. And we've seen you at council meetings, you know all about that.
Yeah.
Would you support us in our effort to have final orals reinstated at city council meetings?
Is this assuming, like, once we go back into in-person meetings or now during
Yeah, but
COVID?
I think maybe there's
You're on the
an
phone right
opportunity
now.
for call-in final
Yeah.
orals. But we want to
Okay.
know your feelings about it.
Sure.
On this issue, we both do agree.
Yeah, I know that for sure.
And
'cause
it's
I've heard
okay if
too.
you don't
Yeah.
agree with us.
So I sort of agree with you guys. Okay. So my position is this, that I strongly believe, and I've actually spoken at council about this, the importance that community is heard, and that the community has an opportunity to speak to council and have their voice on public record. This is absolutely essential. This is one of the reasons why in my participation with a group called Our Burbank, which is with the Public Information Office, that I've fought really hard to get going a program where we would do walk-in talks with the city council on Chandler. So right before COVID, we did our first walk-in talk with Emily Gabel-Luddy and Sharon Springer to give an opportunity for the community to have their ear and to speak about their concerns, right? And at city council meetings, it's tough because, I have a lot of public speaking experience, and I still get up there and I get all nervous, and you're in front of the dais, and it's intimidating.
Especially when you're on the clock.
Right, and you're on the
Yeah.
clock,
Yeah.
you're trying to rush really quick to get through your topic. So, I could see how someone wouldn't want to do that, especially if they have an opinion they think might not be very popular. So anyway, I just feel like there should be more ways and opportunities to have the resident voices heard. And so I believe strongly in community meetings and informal kind of meetings. I also believe strongly in allowing emails and other kinds of communications to be shared during council meetings as well. So I send emails sometimes, like I cannot get there at 6 o'clock or whatever. And I send an email and I don't even know sometimes if they've read it.
Right.
They'll say, thank you for your email. And I'm not sure, and I don't know if my position's being accounted for. And I know if I'm there personally, I can influence maybe have an impact, but an email does so much. So I've seen other councils actually read their emails. So this idea is like this. All right, on the topic of a final comment at the end. I don't know how effective that is in actually allowing more citizen voices. Because that's really my goal, right, is to allow more citizen voices. And if you've got a person like the three of us sitting at this table who are hardcore council attendees and are willing to sit there sometimes until midnight or 1 in the morning to have a final comment, then you're really restricting really who can do a comment during that period. It becomes almost like a privilege to be able to be able to stay up that late, because you don't have to get up early in the morning, or to have the time to be able to sit in council for 4 hours in order to wait. So that time is basically a very small number of people who can comment. So for me, I want to make sure as many people can comment as possible. So I'm not sure how much that final comment would be useful in that regard. But I do agree that having as many ways as possible to comment and have as many people input as possible, that's really important for me. So I would want to sit down with you and actually have a discussion about why you think that particular thing is important. But at this time, I just don't see how that would allow more people to speak.
We'll definitely fill you in after.
Yeah, please do. I would love to hear
And
yours.
I just got to ask, when you were on your walk on the Chandler Bike Path, did you have more than 3 minutes to speak?
Yes.
I'm kidding.
Yes.
That's an ongoing thing. It used to be 5 minutes, and it was
Yes,
3. And less
yes.
city council meetings too. Don't forget that. Before COVID, there were a lot of missed Tuesday nights, so it's a real challenge to
Agreed.
have your voice heard.
Exactly.
We have 3 questions that we didn't send you.
Okay.
We just want to see how you feel about them.
Okay.
And the first one is about.
And all the council, the candidates got these same 3 questions.
Okay.
I don't know if you
Great.
said that.
Not ahead of time.
Okay.
And we have common feelings about these issues. Maybe you
Okay.
don't. We
Okay.
want to hear your feelings. Many Burbank residents feel, many Burbank residents, but we're a part of a group called Say Burbank Neighborhoods, where there is a big forum of people, and we share opinions and things. That's what I mean when I say many. And not all. We don't always agree on things. But many Burbank residents feel that we have a problem with overdevelopment.
Yeah.
That may be permanently changing the character of our community. What are your thoughts on overdevelopment in Burbank?
Great. Yeah, I've definitely heard that sentiment. And one of the things we love about Burbank, I'm sure we can agree on this, that we love just the hometown, kind of small town, the big city feel, right? And what happens if you have a lot of big developments, it starts to lose that character. So my approach to housing in the future, because we have to build housing. We are required by the state of California to bring in around 7,500 units, and the city's goal itself is 12,000 units. And of course, those large-scale, multi-floor buildings are going to be the attractive ones because they bring in a lot of numbers, right? But like you said, that will become what feels like overdeveloped. So my perspective is that, yes, we sometimes do need those larger developments, but we have to be careful where we place them. Make sure to put them in areas that make sense, so near our Metrolink stations, near our transportation stations, in large corridors. And then the rest of the community that's single, it's R1 or R1H, single family housing, instead to approach it from a gentle density perspective. So gentle density is basically peppering around different kinds of small scale density spread out in the city so it doesn't take away the feel of the community. So that would be accessory dwelling units, switching from single family homes to duplexes on larger streets where there's more parking, to do multi-purpose buildings that are partly commercial, partly residential, small scale though, like on Magnolia, for example, would be a good example, or on Burbank Boulevard. That way you're adding housing little by little all throughout the city, and when you're driving around, you don't even know this much of a difference. So I think sharing the load between those 2 kinds of housing strategies would allow us to build the housing that we need for our city to meet our demands, and also at the same time reduce the likelihood that we'll start popping up high-rise after high-rise, so it would be more careful. But we do have to build 7,000 units, so that's a whole other topic about how to bring in more of those. But it's important, I think, to me as a candidate and as a resident, that as we move forward in Burbank, that we keep this community feel that we love so much, and to remember why we're here in the first place. So that's part of my vision.
Thank you. Mike, I'm going to get question number 3. One of the best kept secrets in Burbank lately has been the coming addition of a large Amazon facility at the new Avion development, which a lot of people in Burbank don't seem to know much about either, on Hollywood Way, just north of the airport there. Why do you think this has been kept a secret, if you will? And how do you feel this will affect the surrounding neighborhood and the entire community?
Yeah.
Also, what do you think will happen to the new Avion development when the high-speed rail facility comes to that area?
All really good questions. That last question about the high-speed rail, I have the same exact question, because it's not just the Avion, but it's also the airport, because it's supposed to have a station under the airport, and then the existing track, and then where is the track going to go through the city? Anyway, I have a lot of questions about the high-speed rail. I'm strongly for public transportation. I'm also for high-speed rail. I was lucky enough to live in Europe for a year, and I almost entirely used train and buses for my travel. And having the high-speed rail was pretty amazing, I have to say. So I would think it'd be pretty cool to have high-speed rail here. It's lower cost, it's all electric, so it's lower emissions for traveling around the state. So that's great. But we have to also look at how it's going to impact our community and where are they going to put it and is it going to displace housing? Is it going to displace commerce? So we have to look at that and also, just building. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but I am definitely asking it, and I have been attending the high-speed rail meetings to listen in on that. As for the Avion project in general, it's a really good question why it's been kind of on the hush-hush. I personally think that all of these developments we have, the Front Street project, the Avion, the future of the old IKEA land, that those projects should kind of be regularly updated to the community. Smaller projects kind of pop up, and that's kind of okay, but when these larger projects pop up without the community knowing, it can cause a stir, and you've seen that with the Front Street project. And so I think it's important to, as the projects move forward, to have like regular updates from the economic development and community development departments to let us know that are more, the information is more dispersed. Because they do have updates, but you have to be on the right list in the right place in order to get the notifications for those. So I think that part of it is that just kind of a general sense in the city that there's not a really solid communication plan for how information goes out to the residents and how it goes out to the businesses. I don't know if you're going to ask about businesses next, but in my experiences with Magnolia Park Merchants Association, that during COVID, it has been a real struggle to get the information about all the changes to all our Magnolia Park businesses. And so we're trying as an organization, with at least our membership and all the emails we have, to forward everything that we get. And so Ross Benson and I are both on that committee, and we're both really connected in the city. So everything we hear, we forward to the businesses. But it shouldn't be coming from us. It should be coming from the Economic Development Department, right? So I'm trying to work on that. It's been part of one of my projects to really kind of broaden the scope of communication in the city. So I think that's probably the main reason. It's just that it's just not a coordinated effort as much as it could be to communicate with our residents and businesses, and I'd like to see that change.
Thank you.
One thing we do know, sorry Mike, with high-speed rail coming to the airport, we did get confirmation in a Zoom meeting about the Golden State Specific Plan, which is another huge thing that we're looking at up there, that whole area. If the rail comes, it will be going into where Avion is being built. Avion will be torn down.
Oh, wait, really?
Yes.
No way. So after
Yes.
all that effort of building it and all that?
Yeah, they confirmed that in a Zoom meeting. A couple people I've talked to were there and heard it. I heard it.
So who would purchase the land to take it
I guess
over?
it'd be the High-Speed Rail Authority.
They would just purchase it outright?
I guess so.
Wow, okay, well,
Yeah, so anyway,
thank you for that information. I hadn't heard that, so that's.
Yeah, so we'll all stay on top of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And see what the plan is.
Yeah.
The next question is not about business, but thank you for touching on business issues. If you're elected to city council, the safety and quality of life for Burbank residents should be a priority. What would you consider to be the #1 priority for a city council member?
Oh, gosh, that's a hard question because there's so many priorities. But I think, well, right now, any council member that's elected in this election, the #1 priority is recovering from COVID. That's just it, and in all aspects, whether it's economy, the residents, the infrastructure, our budget, I mean, just pretty much everything. So that's the #1 priority is to be able to get recover from COVID. And that's going to be a challenge for anybody who's in council. But I think it's really important that in order to face these things, we've got to have people in council who have experience, leadership experience, who've had budgeting experience, and who have experience working with lots of different points of view and challenges. My nonprofit background, most of the work I do is in nonprofits who have no money to do anything and have to figure it out anyway. And that's what I find happens on the infrastructure board. And that's what we're going to have to do with the $20 million deficit that we're facing in our city. We're going to have to figure out how to make it work with having less. To be creative in a way that still maintains our safety and our community and high quality of services, which is going to be tough. So we have to be creative, and we need people in there who are able to handle that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've gotten to the final question, and this is a tough one.
I know.
And this could win or lose the election for you.
The whole world hanging in the balance. Are you sitting down?
Yes, I am. No, holding on.
Bulldogs or Indians?
Indians.
There you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, that was
You heard
straightforward.
it here on the Mike and Roy Show.
Yeah.
Roy and I are Indians because our kids all went through the Burbank schools and ended up going through boroughs. But we love the Bulldogs. We love
Yeah.
all the schools in Burbank, and we got great high schools.
Great.
Monterey is a great public
Yeah.
high school that has done so much for so many of our students, and got great private schools. But you went with the Indians.
Yes,
So.
my daughter's a senior there right now.
Yeah,
and
oh,
she's
good.
Remotely.
That's
Yes.
great.
Right.
Well, thank you for coming
Appreciate
down and
Yeah,
answering
my
our tough
pleasure.
questions. This is Tamala Takahashi, a candidate for City Council, and all the best November 3rd.
Good luck.
Yes,
Make
and before November 3rd, because it's all mail-in now.
That's right,
So you're getting
yeah.
your ballots the first week of October. You can mail in starting then, and then the last week before the election, you can drop it off at the library
Or the city clerk's office.
or city clerk's office. Yep.
Yep, very good. Thank you, Tamala, for
Great.
coming down.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time on
On
the
the
Mike and Roy Show.